Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I know this video is very different from the things that I would usually do here on my booktube channel, but if you don't know, I have been very emotionally attached to the A Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin and also its television adaptation, Game of Thrones. However, these past 3 episodes of the final season were a huge disappointment to me, and I wanted to make a video where I could properly explain the myriad of my thoughts about where this show went wrong, and also pull out some evidence from the books to support my beliefs. I figured a video would be the best way for me to do this because I can really just sit here and talk through my feelings for as long as I need and pull out examples where I feel I need to. Initially, going into season 8, I had a lot of faith in Game of Thrones and a lot of faith in the show's head writers, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. However, after episode 4 of season 8 aired, I began to lose a lot of hope because it really seemed like the show was sacrificing character development in sake of shock value, and none of the characters were acting like the characters that I had fallen in love with in these past 8 seasons. Then episode 5 aired and pretty much any hope that I had left was decimated. And once I saw the leaks for the final episode, which did end up being proven correct, I basically went through every single one of the 5 stages of grief. From denial, no, there's no way these leaks are true. They're so bad. This can't be the ending. Like, David and Dan are totally gonna come through in the end, right? To anger. Oh my god, I can't believe I wasted so much of my life getting invested in this show, and this is what they do? Really? This is what they do? To bargaining. Well, maybe the books will be better. I mean, this isn't gonna happen in the books. Like, it's not. George R.R. Martin would never do this to me. To depression, I am never going to love anything ever again. No books, no TV shows. From now on, I am dead inside. And now, at the time that I'm filming this video, I think I have finally come around to acceptance. After some careful consideration and a long mourning period, I realized that it wasn't really the ending itself that I had so much of an issue with, it was the manner of its execution. If George R.R. Martin does ever, in fact, finish The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, the last 2 books in the A Song of Ice and Fire series, the overall plot elements from the Game of Thrones ending will be the same as George himself has said. However, what will be present in the books that wasn't in the show is vital context, which is needed for this ending to make logical sense and stay true to character motivations. Ultimately, despite my initial anger and disappointment, the faults lie not in the ending itself, but in the rushed storytelling and a prioritization of shock value over character development. There are a couple specific issues that I have with the Game of Thrones ending, which I would like to break down in this video, and issue number 1, Daenerys as the Mad Queen. Throughout Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, fans see the character of Daenerys Targaryen go from a young, scared, pregnant teenager and rape victim who is abused by her brother to a young woman who finds the strength within herself to go on after she has lost everything, who eventually finds power and success thanks to her own perseverance and intelligence. She has been a positive role model to women and girls all over the world. I mean, she was Beyonce's favorite character, and I think, considering how many people in the United States have named their daughters Khaleesi after one of Daenerys' titles, something that they probably now regret, you can see how much she really meant to people. Now, Daenerys' father was Aerys II Targaryen, also known as the Mad King. However, Daenerys herself never really showed any signs of mental illness, not like her brother. She was ruthless, yes, but never mad. Every single act of violence she committed, whether you agree with it or not, has some kind of purpose behind it. It was never violence simply for the sake of it. Killing Mirri Maz Duur? Well, that woman had tricked Daenerys and killed her unborn child, Crucifying slave masters? Well, they did the same thing to innocent children, and let's be honest, no matter what, I'm never going to be upset over the death of people who have slaves or benefit off the existence of slavery as an institution. Burning the cows? Well, these were the same men who have been consistently threatening her with rape and imprisonment, so I think you could say this was self-defense. Then there's her burning of the Tarleys, which is easily the most controversial thing that Daenerys has ever done, and I get that, but I would argue that this is still justified. The Tarleys were bannermen to Olenna Tyrell as the last member of the Tyrell family, and they took up arms against her, being complicit in her murder at the hands of Jaime Lannister. Now, Olenna had pledged herself to Daenerys, saying that Daenerys was her queen, so I would say that Daenerys was within her rights to execute these two for treason. They had taken up arms against their liege, something which in the very first book, A Game of Thrones, Robb Stark tells Great John Umber, his father, always taught him that if you take up arms against your liege, the law says you should die. Regardless with whether you believe Daenerys was right to do these things or not, I think we can all agree that there was always some kind of logic behind why she did these things, because Daenerys has proven herself to be politically savvy, and she's also been mentioned many times as being compassionate. There is a big difference between killing someone who has betrayed you and killing innocent people. In fact, throughout the series, Daenerys has said that she doesn't want innocents to suffer. She wants to protect them. For example, in her second chapter in A Storm of Swords, she says, "The blood of my enemies I will shed gladly. The blood of innocents is another matter." Daenerys is Misa, the breaker of chains, a champion of the downtrodden. And we'll just put that whole white saviorhood issue aside for now, because that's really a TV show invention. To my understanding, in the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, slavery is not a racially based system, so that's a whole nother thing we don't have to dive into. Daenerys has never shown any signs of insanity over the course of the series. She's been ruthless, yes, but that's different than being insane, and killing your enemies is different than slaughtering innocents. Now, if the writers wanted to show her decline into mental illness, they could have done that if they had taken more time. Instead, they have Daenerys turn into an entirely different character in the course of 2 episodes, and Dan and Dave can't even seem to agree on what the cause of her mental illness was. On one hand, D&D say that throughout the entire series, Daenerys has displayed a chilling response to the death of her enemies, citing the death of her brother Viserys as an example. But Viserys was her abuser who threatened to cut her unborn child out of her womb moments before Khal Drogo killed him. So how did you expect her to react? Did you want her to cry for someone who has treated her like crap for years and years? Plenty of other characters on Game of Thrones have delighted in the deaths of their enemies or their abusers, and none of them are depicted as being mad for it. Take, for example, Jon and Sansa at the Battle of the Bastards, where Sansa fed her rapist alive to his own dogs, or Arya when she slaughtered basically all of the Freys, or Tyrion, who is supposed to come out of this series looking like a good guy when he strangled his girlfriend, killed his dad, and at his speech at his trial said that he wished he had enough poison to kill the entire population of King's Landing. Yet in season 8, he's suddenly like, "But Daenerys, the Geneva Convention!" And for D&D to say that Daenerys has been a bad person all along and that we as viewers are partially to blame for rooting for her is just really stupid to me, because throughout this entire series, Dan and Dave had defended Daenerys' actions and said why they think she's a good person and not like her dad. So for them to now completely change their stance and say that she was never a hero and she was crazy all along is just so contradictory and illogical.
Scene shows Dany learning a lesson that I think all revolutionaries learned at one point or another, which is that conquering in many ways is a whole lot easier than ruling.
This is a pivotal moment for Daenerys, because for so long her sole goal was getting back to Westeros, conquering Westeros, sitting on the Iron Throne, and becoming the queen that she believes she has every right to be. And now she has the opportunity.
She's driven by kind of a deep empathy, a much deeper empathy than probably anybody else in the show. It's something that makes her as charismatic as she is to people because they can sense the sincerity of it. Her empathy allows her to look at the people of Westeros and say, why the hell would they ever follow me if I hadn't proven myself through my actions to be somebody worth following? Why would they let me rule if I hadn't proven myself to be somebody who has ruled well somewhere else?
It's also been suggested by the writers that Jon's rejection or the sight of the Red Keep, the home her family built, finally set her off and caused her to go on this mass killing spree, but neither of these explanations really make logical sense to me. Daenerys has survived the death of her unborn child, 2 of her dragons, and her closest friends and advisors without going insane. So saying that Jon breaking up with her is what pushes her over the edge is pretty ridiculous to me. And when you think about it, yes, Jon has more support in the north than Daenerys, but the people in King's Landing probably don't even know who he is. Daenerys had plenty of allies. She had an alliance with the Martells, and she had Yara Greyjoy and the fleet of the Iron Islands on her side. Also, why have Daenerys legitimize Gendry with the purpose being he will then owe loyalty to her if when she attacks King's Landing, she's not going to call upon him to rally the Stormlanders to her cause? And if it's the Red Keep that set her off, why didn't Daenerys just fly to the Red Keep, easily destroy Cersei, and take the Iron Throne for herself? I don't understand how that is supposed to correlate with her slaughter of thousands of innocent lives, something which up until this point she has been firmly against. In my opinion, it's rather sexist to blame Daenerys' descent into madness as inevitable due to her being a crazy Targaryen when Jon Snow is also a Targaryen and he comes out of the show looking like the morally right hero. It's also sending a very nihilistic message because throughout the entire show, Daenerys has acknowledged that her father was an evil man and she doesn't want to end up like him. She's consistently tried to be a better person than he was, and the show is basically sending the message that no matter how much she tried, it was never going to be good enough. Jon has consistently expressed that he does not want to judge a child based off the sins of their father, which I totally agree with, and Daenerys has said the same. But by having Daenerys turn into her father, the show is really telling all people who have abusive family members that no matter how hard you try, that's going to be in your DNA and you can never escape your crappy family. I also have a huge problem with the xenophobic and sexist viewpoints that are being validated by having Daenerys go mad. What really bothered me was that the Starks, even after Daenerys helps them against the Long Night, hate her not because of any particular character flaws, but because she's not one of them. This view that you should not trust people just because they are foreign is really harmful and also, I think, really out of character for the Starks. Arya in particular, because the books tell us that she is great at making friends and very interested in other cultures. So to have Arya hate Daenerys just because she's not a Stark when they've never even interacted on screen is really dumb, and it's really basically telling us that this xenophobia exemplified by the Starks is a valid viewpoint. I also have a huge problem with how the Varys betrayal was handled. The things that Varys says about Daenerys are incredibly sexist. And to make Daenerys look like the bad guy for executing him when he was literally plotting to murder her is ridiculous. I mean, when Jon gave her that side eye during that scene, I wanted to be like, Jon, remember when you executed a little boy because he killed you, and now you're judging Daenerys for executing someone who is actively trying to kill her? Varys describes Daenerys as a hysterical woman who is unable to keep her emotions in check, a sexist belief that is then validated when Varys dies looking like a good guy martyr, something which the books tell us he is definitely not, and Daenerys ends up going on a murderous rampage. This totally validates the sexism presented by Varys, undermines women in power, and this is not the attitude that we need in modern day America, which is so running rampant with sexism, especially in politics. Now, issue number 2, Jaime Lannister's character assassination. Listen, maybe I'm in denial here, but I am still not convinced that Jaime Lannister's character arc is going to end in the books the same way it ended in the show. For years now, I have thought that the show really doesn't do Jaime's character arc justice. I don't know if D&D really understand Jaime as a character, so it's really hard for me to believe that he's going to go back to Cersei in the books when his arc in the books is so different. The show undid a lot of Jaime's character development when they had him go back to Cersei in the show, including that infamous rape in the Sept scene, which is actually a consensual sexual encounter in the books. And I know the writers and the actors have claimed that they meant to portray that scene as consensual, but if they genuinely think a man forcing himself on a woman while she says, "No, no, we can't," is consensual, then they clearly don't know what consent is. In the books, we see Jaime come to terms with the person who Cersei is and begin to break away from her. In A Feast for Crows, when he receives a letter from Cersei asking for his help, he orders the letter to be burnt, and this shows that he is done with her and that he doesn't feel like he owes her anything anymore. There's also Jaime's weirwood dream in A Storm of Swords, which seems to foreshadow him joining Brienne in a fight against the others and possibly dying in the process. The show also completely disregards the Valonqar prophecy that Cersei receives from Maggie the Frog in the books, and while not all prophecies necessarily have to come true, everything else that Maggie the Frog has told Cersei has been correct so far. So I still believe there is a chance that in the books, Cersei will be killed by one of her little brothers, most likely Jaime. I don't believe that they are going to die together in the books like they do in the show, or if they do, I think the context will be very different. But, like I said earlier, I think that D&D have a very different understanding of Jaime and Cersei's characters than how they are in the books. I think they really wanted us to believe that Cersei is Jaime's true love, and the show definitely makes Cersei more sympathetic than she is in the books. I actually think in the books it would make more sense for Cersei to be the Mad Queen than Daenerys, because in the books we see that Cersei is actually sexually aroused by fire, which is a direct parallel to the Mad King, and she also rapes her handmaid Tana Merryweather, who is not a character in the show, which is basically Cersei's way of reenacting her own sexual assault, this time placing herself in the role of the abuser. The thing is, though, if the show wanted me to believe that Cersei was Jaime's true love and they really belonged together, I wish they never would have had Jaime sleep with Brienne in the show. I think D&D realized that so many people in this fandom rooted for a Jaime and Brienne romance, so they decided to make the two of them have sex to please the fans, but what they actually did is make all of the fans angrier. Something I always loved about a potential Brienne and Jaime romance is that the books continually describe Brienne as being physically unattractive. Obviously, Gwendolyn Christie, who plays Brienne in the show, is a very pretty lady, but in the books, Brienne is described as being ugly. And while Jaime is conventionally handsome, he is still drawn to Brienne because of the goodness of her heart. George R. R. Martin has described Jaime and Brienne as a gender-swapped Beauty and the Beast story. She is physically unattractive but has a good heart, and he is physically attractive but is lacking in morals before he meets her. However, the show effectively reduces Jaime and Brienne's romantic connection to him using her for sex and breaking her heart. This is reinforcing the idea that Brienne is somehow less than and unlovable due to her physical appearance. The show is making it seem like, of course, Jaime is going to go back to the beautiful but morally bankrupt Cersei over the physically unattractive but kind-hearted Brienne. And by having Brienne end up as Lord Commander of the King's Guard, reducing her to celibacy, I think they're kind of reinforcing the idea that women who are not physically attractive can't find real love. And no matter what D&D say, I think that Jaime and Cersei's romantic relationship is not a good romance. It is destructive. They continually bring out the worst in each other. They aren't soulmates. And having Cersei express concern over Jaime's injuries when she sees him again, after she sent Bronn to kill him earlier that season, was laughably bad. No matter what D&D say, I don't believe that Cersei ever loved Jaime, at least not as much as he loved her. Having Jaime go back to Cersei in the end invalidates years of character development, and it left me wondering what was the point of me watching his character journey over these 8 seasons if he's going to end the series as the same bad person that he was back in seasons 1 or 2. I mean, Robb Stark could have killed him in battle in season 2, and his death would have had the same narrative impact. Also, having Jaime say that he never cared about saving innocent lives is so blatantly untrue, because the reason he killed the Mad King was because the Mad King was going to kill the entire population of King's Landing, so Jaime stabbed the Mad King to prevent the wildfire explosion that would have decimated the city. Having him say that he never cared about anyone but Cersei is not true. Like with Daenerys, Jaime's ending is really sending the message that you can try to be a good person, but you can't escape your past. It's really a slap in the face to any person with abusive parents or an abusive romantic partner who saw Daenerys and Jaime as inspirational. To quote George R.R. Martin, "I want there to be a possibility of redemption for us, because we all do terrible things. We should be able to be forgiven, because if there is no possibility of redemption, what's the answer then?" Issue number 3. A girl is Arya Stark of Winterfell? Now, I will say, watching Arya Stark's ending on the show play out on screen, I didn't hate it as much as I was expecting to, but I do still have some problems with how this ending was executed, so I would still like to talk about it. I will try to keep it brief, but I think if this was their intended ending for Arya, they could have set it up a lot better. Arya's entire storyline throughout the books and the show centers on identity and family. Her identity as a Stark of Winterfell is something which she takes great pride in, which she clings to, and which gives her the strength to go on in her most difficult moments. Yes, revenge is an important part of her arc. However, revenge is really just something that she clings to because she feels like she has nothing left. She wants to return home to her family more than anything else.
A girl is Arya Stark of Winterfell, and I'm going home.
There are several Arya quotes from the books which really show this. However, I think this one from A Feast for Crows is probably the best example of how Arya views herself and her identity as a Stark. "No one," she would answer, "she who had been Arya of House Stark, Arya Underfoot, Arya Horseface. She had been Ari and Weasel too, and Squab and Salty, Nan the Cupbearer, a grey mouse, a sheep, the ghost of Harrenhal. But not for true, not in her heart of hearts. In there she was Arya of Winterfell, the daughter of Lord Eddard Stark and Lady Catelyn, who had once had brothers named Robb and Bran and Rickon, a sister named Sansa, a direwolf called Nymeria, a half-brother named Jon Snow. In there, she was someone." Even in the show, Arya gives up on revenge and goes home after finding out that Jon is king in the north. And then in episode 4 of season 8, she says that her and her siblings need to stick together because they are the last of the Starks, only to have her ride for King's Landing at the end of the episode, saying that she's never going home to Winterfell ever again, when she was just talking about family unity. As Ned Stark always said, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives, and the show ends with the Stark siblings all going in their separate directions, with it being unclear if they will ever see each other again. Throughout season 8, the show really showed Arya's internal conflict through the Hound and Gendry, with these two characters representing parallel journeys that she could take. The Hound represented vengeance and death, while Gendry represented life and new beginnings. The night before the Battle of Winterfell, Arya made the conscious choice not to spend her potential last night alive with the Hound and Beric, two hardened old men, but to spend it making love to Gendry in what was easily the healthiest and most consensual loss of virginity scene ever on the show. When the Hound and Gendry arrive at Winterfell in the very first episode, the Hound is riding a black horse and Gendry is riding a white horse. When Arya goes to King's Landing with the Hound, she is riding a black horse, but the horse that appears to her after the massacre is white. Now, a lot of people have latched on to the biblical book of Revelation, saying that this white horse represents death, but I actually think it's not that. According to Celtic mythology, black horses represent death and destruction, which is fitting considering in the books the Hound rides a black horse which he names Stranger after the god of death in the Faith of the Seven. Meanwhile, white horses to the Celts represented fertility and new life. Trust me, you guys, my Patronus is a white horse. Pottermore confirmed. I've done a lot of research on what they represent. The Hound also encourages Gendry to pursue Arya after the battle at Winterfell, and then in his final conversation with Arya, he tells her to pursue life so that she doesn't end up like him. All of this should foreshadow Arya deciding to give up revenge and begin a new life with Gendry, the man who loves her, right? Evidently not. Now, Arya's ending in the books could be very similar to this one because Arya does name her direwolf Nymeria after the warrior queen of the Rhoyne who led her people to a new life in Westeros when she settled in Dorne and married Mors Martell, becoming the Princess of Dorne. However, the thing about Queen Nymeria is that she was bringing her people with her, and then she ended up marrying a man and having children, creating a new life for herself and her followers. So having Arya leave Westeros alone, leaving behind her family and everyone who loves her when the entire purpose of her arc was to find family and a home again, doesn't ring true to me. It seems to me that D&D did the same thing to the Arya and Gendry relationship they did to the Jaime and Brienne relationship. They knew that fans wanted these characters to be together, so they decided that the two of them should have sex to please the fan base. But in the end, they didn't want the characters to be together, so by having them have sex, they actually do a huge disservice to the fan base and make it look like Arya used Gendry for sex and never actually cared about him, just like they made it look like Jaime used Brienne for sex and never actually cared about her. What was the purpose of having Gendry propose to Arya and say, none of it matters if you're not with me, if in the end they're not going to be together? Gendry ends up being alone and being a lord, something that he never wanted, and Arya goes off by herself. If he says that he doesn't want any of this if he's not with Arya, then why not have him go after Arya? I don't think that Gendry is going to be Lord of Storm's End in the books. I think that's going to be his half-brother Edric Storm, but in the show they combined Gendry and Edric into one character. In season 1, Arya tells Ned that's not me when Ned says that someday she will marry a High Lord, but D&D seemed to forget the very thing she said right before Ned began his speech. Can I be Lord of a Holdfast? And that's basically what Gendry was offering her. He doesn't know how to be a lord, and he was offering her an opportunity to be his equal, to rule alongside him and to make a difference in the world. Having Arya reject him solely because she doesn't want to be a lady when, as Lady of Storm's End, she could implement change, be the same person she always was, and have a husband who will respect her and treat her as his equal is not feminist. I am so tired of male writers thinking that their strong female characters have to be alone and not have a love interest in order for them to remain strong. It's totally cool if writers want to have one or two female characters who are not interested in romance, because aromanticism and asexuality do exist after all, but to have every single female character end the show alone, single, without a romantic relationship is really depressing. It's sort of sending the message to girls that they can either be a strong, empowered woman or they can be in love, not both, and that's a really terrible message to be sending. I think it would be much more feminist to depict a positive romantic relationship between a man and a woman that is built on a mutual respect and trust, where they love each other and treat each other as equals. Issue number 4. All build up and no payoff. There were so many things or instances of foreshadowing that ended up going nowhere in season 8. First of all, the Golden Company. It has been stressed they have never broken a contract, and that ended up meaning absolutely nothing at all. The entire Golden Company were basically massacred in the first 5 minutes of the battle, and they didn't even give Cersei her elephants. What was the point of having Jon come back to life for some kind of purpose if in the end he's not even the one to kill the Night King? It's Arya, and Jon's parentage ended up being pretty meaningless in the end. We barely got to see him react to this own news about himself, and since he doesn't end up being king, the whole revelation about Jon's true parentage exists solely to tear Daenerys down and drive her crazy. This could be interesting if it's done as a deconstruction of the Chosen One trope, because to be completely honest, I hate the Chosen One trope, but really what ended up happening was Jon's true identity existed just to drive a female character crazy, and that really bothers me. The Night King and the White Walkers have also been built up as the ultimate evil in this show from the very first scene in the very first episode, but in the end, the Franken Mountain ended up being harder to kill than the Night King. Also, what was up with all of that Jon and Daenerys potential baby foreshadowing? In season 7, it was constantly implied that Daenerys might not be infertile, that Jon and Daenerys might have an heir together, and ultimately that meant nothing. Jon and Daenerys' romantic relationship existed not to restore House Targaryen, not to make this world a better place, but to make it all the more painful when Jon murders her. And I really hate this direction considering how many women in the modern world are murdered by current or former romantic partners. Finally, Bran's powers. By giving Bran the power to see everything that has ever happened, everything that is currently happening, and possibly the future as well, the writers made him too powerful and did not utilize any of that power. When Jon was fighting with Sansa and Arya about Daenerys, Bran could have just used his powers to see everything that Daenerys has ever done and make a determination about whether they could really trust her or not, one way or the other. There is also no reason why Daenerys should have lost another dragon when Bran could have easily seen that Euron and the Iron Fleet were lying in wait with a scorpion. And D&D's excuse in the Inside the Episode feature that Daenerys forgot about the Iron Fleet when they literally just discussed the Iron Fleet in a war council is such poor storytelling. After seeing how this season ended up, I'm kind of convinced that the reason Bran didn't help anyone all season is because he just wanted to be king and wanted everyone to be at each other's throats. Chaos is a ladder. And finally, that brings us to issue number 5. Change or more of the same. Game of Thrones was a show with many powerful, intelligent, and inspiring female characters. However, the show that began with a mediocre man sitting the Iron Throne when he never wanted to be king ends with a mediocre white man sitting the throne when he never wanted to be king. Yes, Bran may not have a desire for power for other people, which means that he's not going to be greedy with it, but the writers also completely stripped him of any semblance of personality. Yes, he's not going to go power hungry, but is having a monarch who is just going to apply blank logic to every situation really the best choice either? I personally don't think so. Having Bronn as a High Lord and a King's Counselor is also really ridiculous to me because, well, one, why have him as Master of Coin when he said in the show that he's terrible at money? And two, he has never expressed any interest in making this world a better place for anyone. The show also completely undid his character development by having him be a complete and total jerk to Tyrion and Jaime when he saw them again at Winterfell. Bronn doesn't care about making this world a better place. He just cares about himself and having money. What's upsetting to me is that with the exception of probably Sansa, every person who could have implemented real change in Westeros is either dead or unwilling to accept power. Daenerys was a queen who wanted to break the wheel and had a lot of empathy for the downtrodden. However, D&D turned her into the mother of war crimes. Jon has a sense of honor, inspires loyalty in those who follows him, and is much more politically competent in the books than in the show, but he ends his story back at the Wall where he began it in season 1, even though there's literally no reason why there should be a Night's Watch anymore. I mean, why even have a Night's Watch when there's peace with the wildlings and the White Walkers are gone? Like, why does it still need to exist? We were told constantly throughout the show how smart and clever Tyrion was, but in seasons 7 and 8, he makes increasingly dumb political decisions, which, let's be honest, probably should have gotten him killed in the end. Arya could have been an amazing Lady of Storm's End who could teach girls that they can be whatever they want to be. And I think if she and Gendry had been Lord and Lady of Storm's End, they would have been great allies for the small folk, considering how much time Arya spent among them and Gendry used to be one. However, instead of that, D&D send her west of Westeros on what could potentially be a suicide mission, reinforcing the faux feminist narrative that being a lady is only for traditionally feminine women, as if warrior ladies like the Mormonts, Alicent Blackwood, Visenya Targaryen, etc. do not exist. George R.R. Martin promised us a bittersweet ending to A Song of Ice and Fire, but the Game of Thrones ending was pretty heavy on the bitter. I mean, most of the characters got endings that no one in the fandom wanted for them. I guess the ending works out great for you if your favorite character is Bran or you're a die-hard Sam and Gilly shipper, but it's not great for anyone else. Even Sansa, who gets to be Queen in the North, which I think she totally deserves, she now doesn't have any of her family around her, and the show made her look like a xenophobic mean girl for most of season 8, like she's the love child of Cersei and Littlefinger. So, who is to blame for all of these problems? Ultimately, while I had problems with these plot elements that I previously mentioned, they could have made sense if the show had taken time to develop them over seasons and properly explore the headspaces, psychological states, and character motivations of the people involved. Instead, it came across as very rushed and unsatisfying. I'm not going to lie to you, I think that if George R.R. Martin ever does finish A Song of Ice and Fire, the ending is going to be very similar. He said that the main characters are going to have pretty much the same fates, and the secondary characters might end up in slightly different places. I do think that Daenerys is probably going to go mad in the books or die in some way similar, but I still don't believe that this is the ending that he wants for Jaime, and I could see Arya going west of Westeros, I guess, but it would have to be in a very different context. I personally have a pet theory that when she gets back to Westeros, possibly in the next book, she's going to find Lady Stoneheart, have to give her mother the gift of mercy, and then become the new leader of the Brotherhood Without Banners. The thing is, though, that George's books will have the time to actually properly explore the characters' motivations and explain why it is that they're doing the things they are doing. He can slowly develop this over the course of 2 more books and not shove the entire thing into 2 episodes of a TV show. I'm not mad about season 8 because things didn't go my way. I'm mad because the way that we got to this ending was so rushed and nonsensical. D&D wasted so much potential as they raced to the finish line, eager to leave Game of Thrones behind and collect their first Disney paycheck now that they've been commissioned to write a Star Wars trilogy. George R.R. Martin didn't want Game of Thrones to end yet. HBO didn't want Game of Thrones to end yet. D&D have said that the network was willing to give them more money to make more episodes in season 8, or to keep the show running for several more seasons altogether. However, D&D weren't interested, even though more episodes or more seasons could have helped wrap all of this up into a more logical conclusion. D&D just wanted to do the bare minimum they had to so that they could leave this behind and focus on Star Wars. And their complete, utter lack of caring, for lack of a better word, shows in the final product. I feel really bad for the cast and crew because it's clear they all put a lot of hard work into this season, and they really put their heart and soul in their performances. However, even though they tried their best, the writing just wasn't there, and that's why this season was a failure. So guys, that is it for this video. If you are still here watching, man, you are a trooper. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a like or subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, and I hope to see you in the next video.